Title: The Fire Within, a story inspired by Napoleon Hill. Part 1. No one is coming. And that's your greatest gift hook. What if the moment you stopped waiting for someone to save you was the moment your real life began? Eli Parker sat on the cold metal bench of the town bus station, his worn backpack beside him and a half-finished coffee in his hand. The morning was still dark, just before sunrise. Fog clung to the pavement like it had secrets to keep. He looked out toward the empty road and sighed, not in sadness, but with something else building inside him. He had been waiting for a break, for someone to notice him, for some invisible hand to lift him out of the mess he was in. But no one came. Not when the bills piled up. Not when his car broke down. Not when his dreams started to feel like a joke. Eli thought about his father's old words. No one is coming, son. That's not bad news. That's your starting point. Back then, it had sounded harsh. Now, it felt like truth. He stood up, coffee in hand, and began walking, not toward a job, not toward a rescue, but toward a decision. Eli had always thought life would change when the right time showed up. But now he saw that waiting had cost him years. He had waited for motivation. Waited for someone to guide him. Waited for things to feel easier. But life doesn't hand out second chances in fancy wrapping. It offers them in the form of hard truths, and this was his. No one is coming. Not his friends. Not some miracle. Not a mentor with a golden key. And oddly enough, that realization didn't crush him, it lit a fire. Because if no one was coming, that meant the outcome was up to him. And if it was up to him, he could do something about it. Later that morning, Eli pulled out a small notebook. On the cover, he wrote one sentence in bold letters. I am responsible for everything from this moment forward. The idea was simple, but powerful. It meant no more blaming the economy. No more hoping someone would discover him. No more waiting for perfect conditions. He would take ownership. Full ownership. Not just of the wins, but of the struggle too. That night, Eli sat on the floor of his tiny one-room apartment. There was no couch, no fancy TV, just a mattress in the corner and a cracked mirror by the window. But he didn't feel poor. He felt powerful. Why? Because for the first time, he wasn't a victim of his circumstances. He was the author of his response. And with that power came responsibility. He made a promise to himself. He would wake up early. He would do the work. He would show up even when he didn't feel like it. He didn't need someone to hold his hand. He needed to become the kind of man who held his own ground. The next few days weren't easy. He had to walk 5 miles to a temp job that paid little and demanded a lot. His feet ached. His pride took a hit. His mind whispered, you don't have to do this. No one would blame you if you quit. But Eli remembered something he'd read from Napoleon Hill. Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Maybe this walk, this pain, this silence, was the seed. Maybe his strength was being built in the struggle. And so, he kept walking. One rainy morning, as water soaked through his shoes, Eli smiled. Not because he was comfortable, but because he had done what he said he would do. He was learning to trust himself. That, he realized, was worth more than anyone's approval. More than motivation. More than comfort. That was confidence. Earned. Not borrowed. He started talking to himself differently. Not like someone who needed saving, but like someone already rising. Instead of saying, I hope someone gives me a shot, he said, I'll create the opportunity. Instead of, I'm not sure I can do this, he said, I'll find a way. I always do. This wasn't false positivity. It was discipline. It was mindset training. It was transformation. And every small win, every early morning, every completed task, every moment he wanted to quit but didn't, stacked up like bricks under his feet, lifting him higher. Eli stopped needing applause. He stopped checking if anyone was watching. He started showing up for himself. That's when something inside him shifted. He realized something. You don't become strong by being rescued. You become strong by carrying the weight, not all at once. But every single day, you carry it when no one notices. You carry it when you're tired. You carry it when you're scared. And in carrying it, you change. One night, weeks later, Eli was journaling when he wrote down something that surprised him. I don't want someone to save me anymore. I want to see what I become when I save myself. That was it. That was the moment he stepped into his own power. He didn't know exactly where life would take him. He didn't have all the answers. But he had the one thing most people never find, a reason to keep going, even when it's hard. A belief that he was enough to begin with. A fire that no one could light for him, but no one could take away either. To be continued in Part 2. Discipline over motivation. Would you like me to continue with Part 2 now? Title: The Fire Within, a story inspired by Napoleon Hill. Part 2, Discipline over Motivation. Hook. What if success had nothing to do with feeling ready, and everything to do with showing up anyway? Eli Parker stared at the blinking cursor on his laptop screen. It was 5:17 a.m. The rest of the city still slept behind fogged-up windows and drawn curtains. His eyelids begged for more rest, and the warmth of his blanket whispered, "Just a little longer." But Eli swung his legs out of bed, anyway, not because he felt inspired. He didn't, not because he wanted to, but because he had made a decision. I will do the work, whether I feel like it or not. Back when Eli first decided to take control of his life, he thought motivation would carry him. And for a while it did. Like rocket fuel, it lit up his mornings with energy. He was excited, focused, alive. But motivation is tricky. It doesn't last. He noticed it the first time the alarm rang on a rainy Monday. The energy was gone. The spark had dimmed. His bed felt like a better choice than his goals. That's when he remembered something from Napoleon Hill. You will never be greater than your daily habits. That truth hit different now. Motivation was a feeling. Discipline was a decision. Eli started small. A journal entry each morning. A short workout before breakfast. A list of daily tasks he would complete no matter what. And then came the real test. The days he didn't want to do any of it. One Tuesday, he woke up with a headache and bills on his mind. The apartment felt colder than usual, and his body ached from his warehouse shift the night before. He thought, I'll skip the routine today. I deserve a break. He almost did. Almost. But just before rolling over, he whispered to himself, show up anyway. That day, everything took longer. Everything felt heavier. But he did the work, and that's the day he started to become unbreakable. See, Eli realized that anyone can show up when they're fired up. But discipline, real discipline, is forged in the boring, hard, uncomfortable moments. And that's where he started to win, not in big leaps, but in quiet mornings, in tired evenings, in choosing effort over excuses. Weeks passed. The motivation rarely returned. But something better took its place. Rhythm. He didn't have to wrestle with himself each morning anymore. The alarm rang, and his body moved. Not because he was excited, but because it was who he was becoming. The man who didn't quit. The man who followed through. He started tracking tiny wins. Not likes or money or praise, but the number of promises he kept to himself. Each tally mark in his notebook was proof. I showed up today. Then came the winter. The cold tested him. The long hours at work stretched him. Friends stopped checking in. Eli began to feel the loneliness creeping in around the edges. But still, he stuck to the plan. Morning routine, daily writing, evening reflection. It didn't matter if it was Christmas Eve or his birthday. The goal didn't care about holidays. And neither did Eli anymore. He had become someone new. His neighbor, a man named Joe who worked nights, asked him one morning, why do you keep doing all this? You never miss a day. Eli smiled and replied, because discipline stays. Motivation doesn't. Joe nodded but didn't get it yet. Most people don't, until they need to. Eli began to see the change. His body was leaner. His mind was sharper. His reactions to setbacks, calmer. He wasn't chasing energy. He was generating it. From structure. From habits. From keeping his word to himself, he had learned that discipline is freedom. The more he followed through, the less he felt like a prisoner to his mood or surroundings. He no longer asked, "Do I feel like it today?" He simply asked, "What did I commit to?" Then came the job offer. A startup founder had found Eli's blog, the one he'd been writing each morning for months without a single comment. "I've been reading your stuff for weeks," the founder said. "I don't know how you're this consistent, but we need that. We want that." Eli didn't say much. Just smiled. He knew the answer. "Because I stopped depending on motivation a long time ago." On his walk home that night, snow began to fall. Light flakes dusted his shoulders as he passed the familiar sidewalk cracks and rusted fences. He thought back to all those mornings he didn't want to get up, all the times he wanted to quit, all the days that felt pointless, and he whispered, not to the snow, but to himself, "You kept showing up. That's what changed everything." Eli understood something most people never do. Success isn't about luck, or timing, or motivation. It's about doing the work, day in and day out, until it becomes who you are. It's about building a life on the unshakable foundation of discipline. And as he walked toward his future, boots crunching against the snow, he knew he wasn't chasing a dream anymore. He was becoming it. To be continued in Part 3. Set ruthless, clear goals. Would you like Part 3 now? Part 3. The boring work, the silence, and the bet. The wind was cold that morning when Eli stepped out of his small apartment. He tightened his jacket and looked at the sky, still half dark. Most people were still asleep, but he was already walking toward his goal. The truth? Eli didn't feel like doing it today. He was tired. The excitement he had felt at the beginning of his journey had faded. What was once a dream full of fire now felt like slow, heavy steps. But he remembered what the old man had once told him in the park. Do the boring work, even when it's quiet. That's where the magic is. So, Eli kept going. He used to think success looked exciting. Loud applause, bright lights, fast wins. But now, he knew better. Success looked like early mornings with no praise. Like writing a single page when your mind felt blank. Like choosing the hard path when no one else was watching. Every day, Eli did the small, simple things. He practiced his craft. He learned something new. He cleaned his space. It wasn't thrilling. It was steady, and slowly, something began to build inside him. Momentum. At first, it was like pushing a wheel stuck in mud. It barely moved. He wanted to give up. But he pushed again. Then again. And one day, it started to roll. Each day that Eli showed up, it got a little easier. Not because the work changed, but because he did. He was stronger. He believed more. He learned to stop waiting for the perfect mood. Some mornings were cloudy in his heart, but he worked anyway. Motivation didn't show up every day. But action did. He stopped comparing himself to others. Some people seemed faster, smarter, more talented, but he reminded himself, this is my path. My pace. He didn't need to run. He only needed to move forward, one step at a time. One day, someone asked him, "How do you stay so focused? Don't you get bored?" Eli smiled. "Yes. Sometimes it's boring. But I love who I'm becoming." He remembered the farmer the old man talked about. The one who planted seeds daily, even when the field looked empty. That's who Eli had become. He worked when the fire was gone. He worked when no one clapped. And slowly, quietly, he grew. As the weeks passed, Eli also learned something deeper. He didn't need to explain himself anymore. At first, he used to try. He'd tell people why he worked so hard. Why he took the long road. Why he wasn't like everyone else. But they didn't get it. Some laughed. Some doubted. Some even told him to stop. So, he stopped explaining. He let his actions speak. While others talked, he built. While they scrolled, he studied. While they waited for the right time, he kept moving. And little by little, the life he wanted began to take shape. Of course, there was still noise, voices outside, opinions online, doubts in his head. But Eli had learned to cut it out. He would sit quietly, sometimes at sunrise, and just listen. No phone. No talking. Just silence. In that silence, he heard something powerful. His own voice. The voice that said, "You know who you are. You know what to do." He held on to that voice. He asked himself simple questions. What matters to me? What do I need to let go of? What am I chasing just to impress others? Those questions gave him clarity. And clarity gave him strength. He realized he didn't need to do everything. He just needed to do the right things. For his purpose. And then came the moment, the quiet, powerful decision. He would bet on himself. Not because he was fearless, but because he was tired of waiting for permission. And no one was coming to save him. No one was going to give him a sign. So he became his own sign. He stopped hoping someone would notice him, choose him, give him a chance. He gave himself the chance. It wasn't easy. He had doubts. He had fears. But every time they came, he took one more step anyway. He knew he wouldn't always win. But he also knew he would never quit. One night, as he sat alone, he whispered to himself, "This journey is mine. The pain is mine. The hope is mine. And whatever comes from it will also be mine. Earned. Built. Owned." Eli bet on himself. And in doing so, he lit a fire inside that no one could put out. He didn't need applause. He didn't need a map. He didn't need anyone to say, "You're enough." Because finally he believed it himself. And that belief, that was the beginning of everything. Let me know if you'd like to continue to part 4 or if you want me to adapt this further, e.g. adding a character name, more dialogue, a setting, etc. Part 4. The Inner Battle and the Two Voices. Eli stood in front of the mirror. It was just another morning. Same small apartment. Same old shirt. Same tired eyes. But today felt different. There was a storm inside him. On one side, a quiet voice whispered, "You've come so far. Keep going." On the other side, a louder voice yelled, "What's the point? You're still not where you want to be. Maybe you're not good enough." Eli had heard that second voice before. Many times. It was the voice of fear, doubt, and defeat. He took a deep breath. Closed his eyes. This is the real battle, he thought. Not outside. Not with others. But right here, inside my own head. That day, Eli made a decision. He would no longer let fear be the loudest voice. He remembered something the old man once told him. There are two wolves inside us. One is fear. The other is courage. The one you feed the most becomes stronger. So, Eli chose to feed courage. That meant taking small risks every day. It meant doing things even when he was scared. Speaking up. Applying for that opportunity. Starting the thing he kept putting off. Fear didn't go away. It still showed up, but now Eli faced it. He no longer ran. He said to himself, "Yes, I'm scared. But I'm doing it anyway." And with every act of courage, no matter how small, something inside him changed. He felt stronger, more alive, more himself. But the journey wasn't just about action. It was also about awareness. Eli started noticing the stories he told himself. When something went wrong, the old Eli would say, "See? You always mess up." Now he stopped himself. He said, "No. That was just one moment. I can learn. I can grow." He learned that the story you tell yourself becomes the life you live. So he rewrote his story. From, "I can't," to, "I will." From, "I'm not ready," to, "I'll figure it out." From, "What if I fail?" to, "What if this works?" He stopped being his own enemy. He became his own teammate. That shift was powerful. It didn't mean he was perfect. He still had bad days. He still got tired. He still made mistakes. But now, he gave himself grace. He talked to himself like a friend, not a bully. When he felt like giving up, he asked, "What would the best version of me do right now?" That simple question guided him through hard moments. One evening, while walking home under the city lights, Eli smiled to himself. He had just finished a long day, full of wins and losses. But he didn't feel defeated. He felt proud, not because everything went right, but because he didn't quit. He whispered to himself, I'm not fighting to be perfect. I'm fighting to stay in the game. And that mindset changed everything. He realized that success wasn't a straight road. It was a winding path. Sometimes you sprint, sometimes you crawl, sometimes you fall flat on your face, but you always get back up. That night, Eli wrote something in his journal. My job is not to control the outcome. My job is to show up with full heart, full effort, every day. And that's what he did, every day. And no matter what. Would you like me to continue to part 5? Part 5. Climbing without applause. It was a rainy Monday when Eli walked into the coffee shop. His hoodie was soaked. His hands were cold. But he didn't care. He grabbed his usual seat in the back, pulled out his notebook, and began to write. He wasn't writing a novel or a speech. He was writing his plans, his thoughts, his vision, the things that mattered. Nobody noticed him. And no one clapped when he walked in. No one said, Good job for showing up. It was just him. Alone. Doing the work, and honestly, that used to bother him. He used to crave recognition. He thought success would feel like standing on a stage, lights shining, people cheering. But now, he understood something deeper. The real winners do most of their work without applause. Eli had stopped chasing attention. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. His success wasn't measured by likes, followers, or praise. It was measured by consistency, integrity, and purpose. He remembered a lesson from a podcast. If you only show up when people are watching, you'll never go far. But if you show up even when no one's clapping, that's when you become unstoppable. So he kept showing up, day after day, without needing permission, without needing a trophy. His life became simple, not easy but simple. Each morning, he focused on 3 things. 1. Show up. 2. Do the work. 3. Stay grateful, even when it rained, even when he was tired, even when he felt behind. One afternoon, a friend called him and asked, Don't you ever get frustrated? I mean, you're working so hard, but no one even sees it. Eli smiled and replied, That's the point. He explained that he wasn't working for quick praise. He was building something real. And real things take time. His journey was like building a skyscraper. Most people only see the final tower. They don't see the years spent building the foundation underground. That's what Eli was doing, laying bricks in silence. Sometimes he got tempted. He'd scroll through social media and see someone else winning big, buying cars, gaining followers, living loud. For a moment, he'd wonder, should I try that too? Should I chase what they're chasing? But the voice inside always brought him back. Stay in your lane. Build your vision, not theirs. So he did. He learned to love the quiet grind. He became proud of the effort, not just the outcome. He didn't need a viral moment. He needed a vital life. And day by day, that's what he was creating. There were no shortcuts, just long roads, steep hills, early mornings, late nights. But with each step, he got stronger. He reminded himself often, I'm not behind. I'm not slow. I'm just building something that lasts. Eli understood that the spotlight fades, but self-respect lasts forever. So he climbed, without applause, without shortcuts, without needing to be seen, because deep down, he knew, the quiet climb makes the loudest impact. Let me know when you're ready for part 6, the final part. Would you like it to include a powerful call to action for readers? Part 6. The door that only opens from the inside. Eli woke up before sunrise. The city outside was still quiet. The sky was dark blue, holding back the light. He poured himself a cup of coffee, sat on the floor, and opened his journal. It had been over a year since he began this journey. A year of ups and downs, wins and losses, doubt and belief. And still, he was here, still rising, still becoming. He looked at his old entries. So many moments where he had felt like quitting. So many days when he didn't believe he was enough. But somehow, he had kept going. And now, something was different. Not louder, not bigger, just Deeper. He felt peace in a place that used to be filled with pressure. He felt strength in a heart that once trembled at the thought of failure. He was still chasing his dreams, but he no longer felt lost without them, because somewhere along the way, he had found something more important than any goal. He had found himself. Eli stood by the window, watching the first crack of sunlight rise over the rooftops. He whispered to himself, "I'm proud of me." Not because he had reached the top of the mountain, but because he had climbed. Every single day, even when it hurt, even when no one clapped, even when it seemed like nothing was working. He had become a different man, not by accident, but by intention. He had learned that success is not just what you achieve, it's who you become in the process. And most importantly, he had learned that everything he needed was already inside him. He remembered something the old man had told him once. The door to your best life doesn't open with a key. It opens from the inside, with belief. That truth had taken him months to understand, years even, but now, it lived in his bones. Eli smiled. He was no longer waiting for someone to give him permission. And no longer begging life to pick him. He had chosen himself. That morning, he put on his shoes and went for a run. The city slowly came alive around him. Horns, buses, people in suits. But Eli wasn't focused on them. He was focused on the rhythm of his breath, the beat of his feet, the voice inside that now said, "You were born for this." As he ran past the park, he saw a young man sitting on a bench, head down, hoodie over his eyes. Eli stopped, walked over. "Hey," he said gently. The young man looked up, surprised. "You okay?" The young man hesitated. "Yeah, just thinking." Eli smiled. "I've been there. Want to hear something?" "Sure." The young man shrugged. Eli sat beside him. "You might feel stuck right now. Like you're behind. Like you're not enough. I get it. I was there. I still feel it sometimes. But here's the truth." He paused. "You already have everything you need. The strength. The vision. The fire. It's in you. But you've got to believe it before anyone else does." The young man looked down. "What if I fail?" Eli nodded slowly. "You might. But what if you don't? What if this is just the part where it's hard, before it's beautiful? Don't let fear write your story. You've got more pages left." The young man smiled faintly. Eli stood up. "Keep going," he said. "You're closer than you think." As he jogged away, he felt tears in his eyes, not from pain, but from purpose. He had finally become the kind of man who could lift others while climbing himself, and that was the real win. The call to action. Your chapter begins now. Maybe you're like Eli. Maybe you've been doubting yourself. Maybe you've been waiting for the perfect time, the right opportunity, the big break. But here's what Eli would tell you. Stop waiting. Start creating. You are not too late. You are not too small. You are exactly who you need to be. You don't need applause. You don't need permission. You don't need every step figured out. You just need one thing. The decision to begin. To rise today. To fight back. To rewrite the story that says you're not enough. Because you are. So pick up that dream again. Apply for that job. Launch that idea. Ask for help. Make the call. Write the first page. Whatever your mountain is, start climbing. You may not see the top yet, but the path becomes clear only when you move. The world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more real ones, brave enough to try, bold enough to fail, strong enough to rise again. So go, choose yourself, back yourself, and become the person you were born to be. Your next chapter, it starts now. Part 7. The power of one more step. The clouds were low that day, gray, heavy. Still, Eli stood at the bottom of the hiking trail, staring up at the long, steep path ahead. It twisted into the mountains like a question mark. He had climbed this trail before, but never alone. Today was different. Today, he came here because he was tired. Tired of slow results. Tired of self-doubt. Tired of the quiet voice in his head whispering, "Maybe it's not working." But something inside him told him to go anyway. One step at a time. So he did. His boots crunched against the gravel. The trees whispered above. His breath was loud in the silence. Each step felt heavier than the last. His mind began to wander. Why does it feel so hard sometimes? Why doesn't anyone notice the effort? What if I'd been climbing the wrong mountain all along? He paused near a bend in the trail and sat on a rock. Everything felt pointless. He almost turned around. But then, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a note. A note he'd written to himself months ago. It read, "Don't quit on a bad day. Bad days are just testing days." He stared at the words, took a deep breath, and stood up. Just one more step, he whispered. So he climbed. He didn't focus on the top anymore. Just the next step. Then the next. It wasn't fast. It wasn't easy. But it was forward. That was enough. Halfway up, the fog thickened. He couldn't see the peak. Couldn't see anything beyond the next few feet. But he kept going. And somewhere in that fog, something shifted. He stopped worrying about how far he had left. He stopped comparing himself to others. He stopped waiting for it to feel easy. He just moved. Point one step, point one breath, point one small act of courage at a time. By the time he reached the top, there were no crowds. No music. No camera. Just silence. And peace. He sat on the edge of the cliff and looked out. The clouds had cleared just enough for a view. Below him were valleys, rivers, tiny towns, all glowing softly under the late afternoon light. He smiled. He hadn't reached success with a giant leap. He had earned it with 1,000 quiet steps. He finally understood. Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they stop too soon. He could have turned back at any point. But he hadn't. He had given himself one more try. Point one more effort. Point one more chance to believe. And that had made all the difference. Later that night, Eli wrote a new message on a sticky note and put it on his bathroom mirror. It said, "When it feels impossible, take one more step." He looked at himself in the mirror. He no longer saw the unsure version of himself from a year ago. Now he saw someone stronger, not because of success, but because of stamina. He realized something powerful. Success doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "Keep going." Message to the reader: if you feel tired, if your dreams seem far, if progress feels invisible, take one more step. You don't need to feel confident to move forward. You just need to be willing. Don't let a moment of doubt destroy a lifetime of potential. Don't quit because the fog blocks your view. Keep walking. Clarity comes with movement. And remember, the breakthrough often comes right after the breakdown. So if today is hard, if you want to give up, just promise yourself this: I will not quit today. Take one more breath. Point one more try. Point one more act of faith. Because that one extra step, it might be the one that changes everything. Let me know when you're ready for part 8, and I'll continue this story. Part 8. The quiet shift. It was a cold morning when Eli walked into the bookstore. Not for a coffee. Not for a meeting. Not even for a new book. He just needed a moment to sit, think, and breathe. Life hadn't gotten easier. The challenges hadn't disappeared. But something had changed. He had changed. Not in a loud, dramatic way. No big celebration. No overnight success. Just a quiet shift, deep inside him. The way he carried himself. The way he spoke to himself. The way he trusted the process, even when the results were slow. As he sat in a quiet corner of the store, he pulled out his notebook, now worn, pages curled, full of thoughts and lessons from the past year. He flipped to a blank page and wrote 3 simple words. I've come far. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to feel proud. Not because he had reached a final goal, but because he didn't quit. He didn't fold when life got hard. He didn't stop when no one noticed. He didn't abandon the dream when the doubts got loud. And that meant something. He looked around the bookstore. People walked past him, busy, distracted, some smiling, some quiet. None of them knew what battles he had faced. And that was okay, because Eli had learned something powerful. You don't need the world to clap for you. You just need to clap for yourself. Later that day, he passed by a young man sitting outside a small cafe. The man looked discouraged, hunched over a laptop, shaking his head. Eli paused. He remembered when he used to sit like that, feeling stuck, wondering if it was all worth it. So he walked over, smiled, and said gently, "It gets better. Not all at once, but it does." The man looked up. "How do you know?" Eli replied. "Because I've been where you are. And one day, I just decided not to quit." They talked for 5 minutes. That was all, but something passed between them, a quiet kind of hope, and for the first time, Eli realized his journey wasn't just helping him, it was beginning to help others too. That evening, he opened his journal again and wrote, "Growth is invisible until it shows up in how you treat people." He remembered all the nights he had cried in silence, all the mornings he showed up tired, all the moments he thought about quitting, and now, he was starting to see what it all built: patience, kindness, wisdom, quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't shout, but moves mountains. The next week, Eli got a call from a company he had applied to months ago. They wanted to interview him for a role he used to feel unqualified for. He paused before answering, not because he doubted himself, but because he felt something deeper. He no longer needed validation, he had already grown. He took the interview. He spoke clearly, calmly, honestly. He didn't try to impress. He just told his story. And for the first time, he realized the most powerful story he had was his journey through the quiet, unseen climb. They offered him the job. He accepted. But not because it proved anything to others. He accepted it as a new chapter, not a finish line. He still had mountains to climb. But now, he had something stronger than motivation. He had momentum. Message to the reader: you may be in the middle of a quiet shift right now. It might not look like much from the outside. No one may see your effort, your growth, your small wins. But you feel it when you stay calm in chaos. You keep going despite fear. You give kindness, even when no one gives it to you. That's growth. That's success. That's the real transformation. And if you're feeling stuck today, remind yourself, I am further than I think. I am stronger than I feel. I am exactly where I need to be. Take a breath. Trust the process. Let the shift happen, quietly, steadily, deeply. You are becoming someone powerful. And soon, the world will feel it too. Let me know when you're ready for Part 9. Only 2 more parts to complete the series. Part 9. The mirror test. It had been exactly 1 year. 1 year since Eli made the decision to change his life. Not with a loud announcement, not with a perfect plan, but with a quiet promise to himself. I will not give up. And now, standing in front of the mirror, he hardly recognized the man staring back at him. Not because he looked different, but because he felt different. He saw the calm in his own eyes. He saw the strength in his posture. He saw a man who had learned to keep going when nothing made sense. That morning, Eli had been invited to speak at a small local event. Just 30 people. He almost said no. Who am I to speak? He thought. I'm not famous. I haven't done anything big. But then he remembered something his mentor once told him. You don't need a big name to give someone a big shift. You just need to be honest. So he said yes. He walked to the front of the small room, heart beating fast, hands slightly shaky, and he told his story. No sugarcoating. No big words. Just the truth. He talked about fear, about loneliness, about the hard mornings, about how success didn't come in a sudden boom, but in slow, quiet steps. He said, sometimes I didn't even know if I was growing, but I kept showing up. People listened in silence. Some nodded. Others teared up, and in that moment, Eli realized something important. His story mattered because it was real, not perfect, not polished, but true. After the talk, a young woman approached him. She said, I was thinking of quitting school. I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. But something in your story gave me hope. Thank you. Eli smiled. He didn't know her story, but he understood the feeling of standing at the edge of doubt, the feeling of wondering if you're wasting your time, the feeling of wanting to quit, but hoping for a sign. And maybe, just maybe, his story had been that sign. He walked home that night under a sky full of stars. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace with the journey. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't know what the future held. But he knew this. You don't always need to see the whole staircase. You just need to keep climbing. Back in his apartment, Eli sat down at his desk and opened his notebook. He flipped through old pages. Some were messy. Some had tear stains. Others had short notes like, "Keep going. This too shall pass. Your future self is watching." He smiled, because every page told the story of a man who refused to quit, and now, here he was, not finished, but becoming. Message to the reader: you may be in the middle of your story right now. Maybe the world hasn't clapped for you yet. Maybe the results are slow. Maybe it feels like no one sees your effort. But let me tell you something. The real success is who you become in the process. The discipline, the grit, the quiet strength, the way you hold yourself now. That's power. So today, I want you to try something. Stand in front of the mirror, look yourself in the eye, and say, "I'm proud of how far I've come. I'm not done yet, but I'm becoming someone powerful." You may not be at the top yet, but you are no longer at the bottom. You are building something no one can take away. You are becoming someone the world needs. So keep going. Not for applause, not for attention, but because you promised yourself you would. And that promise? It's worth everything. Let me know when you're ready for Part 10, the final chapter of Eli's journey. Part 10. The man who kept going. Eli stood at the edge of the lake. It was quiet. The water was still, smooth like glass, reflecting the morning sky. He had come here to think, to breathe, to reflect. It had been almost 2 years since he promised himself he would change. No grand celebration. No headline success. But something deeper had happened. He had become a new man. A man who didn't chase attention, but chased truth. A man who didn't wait for the perfect time. He made the time work for him. A man who knew that real strength was built in silence, not spotlight. That morning, he received a message from the same company where he now worked. They wanted him to lead a new team. More responsibility, more visibility, more impact. He smiled. But not because he was surprised. He had seen this moment in his mind many times. Not because he was arrogant, but because he had trained his belief. He remembered the late nights, the cold mornings, the rejection emails, the interviews that never called back, the tiny voice in his head that said, "Maybe you're not good enough." But louder than that voice was the whisper he chose to believe. "Keep going." That whisper carried him through. That whisper became his companion. And now, it had become his truth. At lunch that same day, he met a friend who hadn't seen him in a while. "You seem different," the friend said. "Calmer. Lighter. Happier." Eli smiled. "I worked for it," he said. "Money?" his friend asked. "No," Eli replied. "Peace." That evening, he walked past the same bench where he once sat with empty pockets and a tired heart, where he had doubted himself, where he nearly quit. He sat there again, this time, not as the man who was lost, but as the man who had been found, not by the world, but by himself. And that was the real reward. Later that night, he opened his notebook, the one that had followed him through every chapter of this journey. He flipped to the very last page, and he wrote, "Success was never about the trophies. It was about becoming the kind of person who didn't give up." He closed the book, took a deep breath, and looked at the stars through his window. He felt light, not because the journey was over, but because the heaviness was. He had proven to himself that discipline beats motivation, belief builds reality, and persistence wins, always. Message to the reader: you are not reading this by accident. You're here because something in you is still fighting, still hoping, still believing that your story can turn around. And I want you to hear this. It will. But not because luck shows up. Because you show up, every day, even when it's hard, even when no one claps, even when no one understands your dream. You show up because you made a promise to yourself, and that promise is sacred. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to move fast. You just need to move forward. Keep going. Because one day you'll look in the mirror and realize you didn't just change your life. You became the kind of person who could, and that's the real win. Eli's story is over. Yours is just beginning. Now ask yourself, what would the future version of me thank me for doing today? Then do that. again, and again, and again, and I promise you, the world will feel your rise. If Eli's story lit even a small fire in your heart, don't let it fade. Seedlings, start today. Write one goal. Take one step. Keep one promise to yourself. Speechaloon, comment below. What's one thing you're going to do today to become the person you were meant to be? Repeat button, share this story with someone who needs to hear. You're not stuck. You're becoming. Pushpin, follow for more real stories that remind you of your own strength. Your journey matters. Your growth is happening. Keep going. We're cheering for you.